The impact snapped Zuri's head to the side, her jaw burning as she staggered backward. Gasps rippled through the store, phones whipped out, recording. The man stood over her, his chest rising and falling with anger, his fists still clenched. A cop, a white cop, in public, without proof. He hit her. Officer Reynolds sneered, gripping her wrist. "Caught you, thief," he growled. "You thought you could get away with it?" But what he didn't know? He just made the biggest mistake of his life. Zuri straightened slowly, rolling her jaw. The sting of the punch was there, but the pain? She barely felt it. A lesser woman might have cried, screamed, demanded justice right then and there. But Zuri, she smirked. Officer Reynolds's eyes narrowed. This wasn't the reaction he expected. Where was the fear? The humiliation? He yanked her arm again, forcing her to face him. "What's funny, thief?" Zuri tilted her head. Her dark eyes studied him, not with anger, not with fear, but with something far worse. Amusement. The growing crowd shifted uncomfortably. People whispered, their phones recording, waiting for what would happen next. A store clerk rushed forward. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Back off," Reynolds barked, his grip tightening. He turned back to Zuri. "You're under arrest for theft. Don't resist, or I'll make this worse for you." Zuri didn't flinch. She simply raised a brow and said, "Big mistake." His fingers twitched. "Excuse me?" She leaned in just a little. "You hit the wrong person." The moment she said it, the doors burst open. A man in a black suit stepped in, flashing a badge. Officer Reynolds let her go. Now. Reynolds' smirk disappeared. Something was very, very wrong. The store erupted into chaos. Customers gasped, voices clashing over one another. Some whispered, "Did he really just hit her?" While others muttered, "She must have done something." Phones were out, recording everything. But the woman in the center of it all? Unbothered. Zuri stood perfectly still, her dark eyes locked on Officer Reynolds. She didn't touch her face, didn't flinch, didn't cry. She just watched him. And that's what unnerved him the most. Reynolds's pulse pounded in his ears. He wasn't losing control, was he? He was in charge here. He tightened his grip on Zuri's wrist, ignoring the murmurs around him. "You're under arrest for theft." His voice was sharp, commanding. "Put your hands behind your back." Zuri just smirked, his jaw clenched. "You think this is funny?" "I think this is pathetic." His face twisted with rage. He reached for his cuffs, yanking her arm roughly. And that's when she leaned in. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Big mistake." Reynolds froze. Something about the way she said it, unshaken, almost amused. It sent a chill down his spine. For the first time, he felt like he might have screwed up. The store clerk stepped forward, panicked. "Officer, please. I don't think she stole anything." "Back off," Reynolds snapped, his grip tightening. A man in the crowd shook his head. "Dude, you just hit her. For a phone?" "She fit the description," Reynolds shot back. "And I don't take orders from civilians?" The tension thickened. Then the door burst open. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. His stride was purposeful, commanding. A flash of gold in his hand, a federal badge. His voice was cool, controlled. "Officer Reynolds, let her go now." The room fell silent. Reynolds blinked. His grip on Zuri's arm loosened slightly. "Who the hell are you?" The man stepped forward, his badge shining under the store lights. "Agent Carter, FBI." A chill ran down Reynolds' spine. For the first time he hesitated, but his pride, too big to back down. He squared his shoulders. "I don't know what this is about, but this woman is under arrest for theft." Agent Carter didn't blink. "What evidence do you have?" Reynolds gestured toward the store manager. "They reported a stolen phone, and I—" The store clerk frantically shook his head. No, we never said it was her. We only asked for help finding it." A ripple of realization passed through the crowd. Reynolds' stomach dropped. That's when Zuri finally spoke. Her voice was calm, even, deadly. "You just assaulted a federal agent." Reynolds' face drained of color, his entire body locked up. "What?" Agent Carter sighed. "You didn't run her ID, did you?" Reynolds opened his mouth, closed it. He felt everyone's eyes on him, the bystanders, recording, the store manager, watching in horror, and Zuri, unmoved, powerful, untouchable. The reality slammed into him all at once. He just punched a CIA operative, and he was about to lose everything. Reynolds let out a forced laugh, his fingers twitching at his belt. "This is a joke, right?" He glanced between Zuri and Agent Carter. "There's no way she's—" "Check her ID." Carter's voice was calm, deadly, final. Reynolds hesitated, his mind spun in circles. His gut told him he was in serious trouble, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. Instead, he doubled down. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed, turning to Zuri. "If you're CIA, prove it." Zuri smiled. It wasn't friendly. Slowly, she reached into her jacket, pulled out a slim black leather case, and flipped it open. The golden emblem of the CIA glistened under the store's fluorescent lights. The room fell into dead silence. Reynolds stared. His throat felt dry. The bystanders, watching in stunned disbelief, the store clerk, mouth slightly open. Zuri took a slow step forward. "You punched a federal agent." Reynolds' heart slammed against his ribs. Body cam, witnesses, phone recordings. His career was over. He tried to recover. She fit the description. How was I supposed to know?" Agent Carter cut him off. "Your body cam footage is already being reviewed." Reynolds' stomach dropped. "Wait." Carter turned to a second agent who had been reviewing the footage on a tablet. The agent nodded. "It's clear. No resisting, no aggression, just excessive force." Reynolds felt lightheaded. Everything he worked for, gone. His mouth opened and closed. This isn't." And then Zuri said something chilling. "I was never here for a phone." Reynolds froze. A single sentence, but it changed everything. "What?" he croaked. Zuri folded her arms. "I wasn't here for a stolen phone. I was here for something much bigger." The second agent turned the tablet around. "You might want to see this." Security footage played on the screen. Reynolds leaned in. A masked figure slipped into the store's back room hours earlier. The footage zoomed in. The figure reached into their pocket and pulled out a phone. They placed it behind a counter, planted it. Reynolds' breath hitched. His mind reeled. Someone set him up. And suddenly, Zuri's words made sense. She hadn't come for a thief. She had come for him. "The real criminal," Zuri said, tilting her head, "is closer than you think." Reynolds' face twisted. No, this isn't." "Who else knew about the stolen phone before you got here?" Zuri asked. Reynolds blinked. He looked around. And then his blood ran cold. His partner, the only other officer on the scene, the one who told him about the stolen phone in the first place. He turned, just as the front doors swung open. His captain walked in. Expression unreadable. And that's when Reynolds realized he was never meant to win this. Reynolds felt a bead of sweat trail down his temple. His mind raced. He wasn't just in trouble. He was in danger. His captain's expression was unreadable, but his presence confirmed it. This wasn't about a stolen phone. This was a trap. And he had walked right into it. Zuri crossed her arms, her expression cool and unreadable. "I wasn't here for a theft, Reynolds. I was here for something much bigger." Reynolds stared at her. His mouth felt dry. What are you talking about?" Agent Carter stepped closer. "We've been investigating your department for months. Internal corruption, case tampering, false arrests, excessive force." Reynolds shook his head. No, I've never tampered with." Zuri's voice was sharp. "We know. You weren't supposed to be the fall guy, but someone inside your unit, They wanted you out. His breath hitched. His own team had set him up. The second agent swiped on the tablet, playing another clip. The store security footage now showed a clear shot of the masked figure's hand. A small identifiable tattoo flashed on their wrist as they placed the phone behind the counter. Reynolds' stomach dropped. He knew exactly who that was, his partner, Officer Mike Landry. Reynolds felt like the ground was slipping beneath him. No, that can't be right. Mike's been my partner for 6 years. He wouldn't. Zuri's eyes were cold. He would. And he did. Reynolds' pulse thundered. This was insane. He had spent his entire career looking at people like Zuri as the enemy. But now, the real enemy had been standing next to him all along, his own partner, his own department, and he had been blind to it. The store remained deathly quiet. Every camera was still rolling. His badge, his protection, his power felt like dead weight on his belt. He turned to his captain. Tell me this isn't real. His captain's expression didn't change. It's real, Reynolds. And then, his captain did the unthinkable. He stepped aside, making way for Zuri. She's in charge now. Reynolds felt his stomach churn. His entire world flipped upside down in a single breath. The woman he punched, the woman he humiliated, was now the one deciding his fate. Zuri tilted her head. I could arrest you right now. His hands curled into fists. I didn't do anything. Didn't you? She asked smoothly. Because you were more than ready to ruin my life over an accusation. You never asked for proof. You never gave me a chance. Reynolds' face burned. For the first time in his career, he understood. He was powerless. And it terrified him. Zuri pulled out handcuffs. She tossed them onto the counter. Here's what's going to happen. Reynolds braced himself. You're going to help me take your department down, she said, voice firm. Or you're going to be the first name on my list. His chest rose and fell. His mind screamed at him to fight back. But he couldn't, because he finally saw the truth. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. Reynolds' breath came in short, sharp bursts. His mind was spinning, his pulse hammering against his skull. Everything he thought he knew, his department, his loyalty, his authority, had been a lie. His own partner set him up. His captain was involved. And the woman he had punched in front of a crowd? She was about to end them all. The captain cleared his throat as he stepped forward. He wasn't his usual loud, commanding self. Number something was off. He wasn't looking at Reynolds. He was looking at Zuri. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Agent Carter, he said slowly. We can discuss this. Zuri didn't blink. There's nothing to discuss. Reynolds froze. His captain knew her name. He knew who she was. That's when it clicked. This wasn't the first time they had met. Reynolds turned to his captain. You knew. His voice was hollow. You knew about all of this. The captain's jaw tightened. Son, you need to step aside. Son? Reynolds let out a bitter laugh. You just let them take control of my case. You let them humiliate me, and now you want me to step aside? Zuri folded her arms. You were never in control, Reynolds. You never have been. His fists tightened. He had spent years following orders, never questioning, never wondering if the people above him were worse than the criminals they chased. And now he was the fool. His own boss had sold him out. His own partner had framed him. He had been nothing more than a disposable piece in a corrupt system. And Zuri? She had seen it all coming. The doors slammed open. Boom, boom, boom. FBI? Hands where we can see them. A flood of armed SWAT agents poured in, weapons raised, moving with deadly precision. The store erupted into gasps, screams, and scrambling feet. The captain stiffened. His eyes darted to Zuri. You set this up. Her lips curved into a smirk. Number, you did that all by yourself. Two officers rushed forward, grabbing Reynolds' partner, Mike Landry. You're under arrest for evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Landry didn't fight. He just glared at Reynolds, as if to say, you should have been smarter. Reynolds felt like he was going to be sick. He turned to his captain, but before he could say a word, the cuffs snapped around the captain's wrists. The older man tensed. You don't know what you're doing. Zuri tilted her head. I know exactly what I'm doing. The captain's eyes darkened. You think you've won? Zuri leaned in. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't think. I know. Reynolds watched everything fall apart. His world, his career, his entire sense of purpose. For a split second, he thought about running. Then Zuri's gaze landed on him. A simple look, one that said, try it. I dare you. So he stood still, silent, watching. Because for the first time in his life, he had no power at all. The store was dead silent. All that remained were scattered footsteps, the weight of what had just happened, and the flashing lights from the SWAT officers outside. Reynolds stood frozen, his hand still hovering near his belt, where his badge used to mean something, where his power used to exist, but not anymore. Click. A pair of cold metal handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Officer Jake Reynolds, you're under arrest for excessive force, false accusations, and obstruction of justice. The words hit harder than any punch. He didn't fight, didn't speak, didn't even move as they pulled him away. His captain, already in the back of a squad car, his partner, exposed for framing him, his entire department, now under federal investigation, and the woman he hit, still standing, untouched, unbothered, stronger than ever. Zuri took a step forward, stopping right in front of him. Her voice was soft, amused, deadly. Next time, check who you're hitting. She turned on her heel, walked straight past the cameras, the reporters, the chaos. And as she disappeared into the night, one truth became painfully clear. She was never the victim. She was the executioner. Before I reveal what happened to the cop next, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this story, it's far from over. The moment the video of his arrest went viral, the entire country erupted. The backlash, unstoppable. The fallout, unbelievable. But the real twist? He wasn't the only officer exposed that night. Stay with me, because what happens next? It's something no one saw coming.